I just finished watching this video right here. It was uploaded by IFL TV earlier on today. And it's Anthony Joshua on the pads with his trainer Robert McCracken ahead of his September 22nd showdown against mandatory challenger Alexander Povetkin. And he is looking tremendously sharp. He's looking more fluid than I've ever seen him before. His balance and his movement is looking better. His hand speed is looking tremendous. He's looking very accurate. Just very, very impressive pad work here from Anthony Joshua for a fighter of his dimensions. The guy is 6'6", 240, 250 pounds. To be moving like this, with this kind of balance and speed and accuracy and coordination, this level of athleticism, it is remarkable for a man of these dimensions to be able to move like that. Trust me. We saw something similar a few weeks ago when Tyson Fury did this workout with his trainer, Ben Davison. Fury even bigger than Joshua, 6'8", 6'9", 260 pounds. And he looked incredibly fluid, slick, fast, sharp in preparation for his fight against Pianeta. It is an incredible time in the heavyweight division because never before have men of this type of size been able to move so well and have such good coordination and hand speed and athleticism. This is something unprecedented in the heavyweight division. Of course, there have been faster heavyweights, better coordinated heavyweights, obviously, but not of this kind of size. No, if you go back to, I don't know, the 40s and 50s when they had heavyweights like Primo Carnera and Abe Simon, who were of a similar dimensions to an Anthony Joshua, they were slow as molasses. They were unbelievably clunky. People accuse Joshua of being clunky. You ain't seen Abe Simon if you think Joshua's clunky. You ain't seen Primo Carnera if you think Joshua's clunky. Those giant heavyweights of the past were just incredibly slow, lumbering. They didn't have the kind of speed, the fluidity, the athleticism, the coordination of today's modern day giant heavyweights. It is incredible to watch these guys of this kind of size be able to move like this. I mean, even Deontay Wilder, he has the kind of height of a Joshua and Fury, although he was 215 for his last fight, so he's not as big as them. So you can kind of say that it's not quite as shocking for Wilder to be quick and, you know, agile and fluid on the pads because he's not carrying as much weight as Fury and Joshua, you know, but it's still impressive. But particularly with Fury and Joshua, carrying that much poundage and being able to move like that, that is remarkable. And even if you look at training footage of Lennox Lewis, Lennox Lewis was well coordinated for a big man. He's not as big as Fury and Joshua, but he was a big man. And I can assure you, he didn't look as explosive on the pads as Anthony Joshua. He didn't look as slick on the pads as a Tyson Fury. Now, don't get it twisted here, people. Just because a guy looks good on the pads or a guy looks better on the pads than another fighter, it don't mean he's going to be a better fighter in the ring. So I'm not saying necessarily that Fury and Joshua are better than Lennox Lewis at all, okay? I'm just talking about from a slickness standpoint when it comes to Fury and just from an athleticism standpoint when it comes to Joshua. They're more impressive than a Lennox Lewis when you see Lewis on the pads. Now, one thing I will say is this, well, a couple things. In all fairness, Anthony Joshua here in this pad work, he's wearing little bag mitts, which are probably like 3 ounce or 4 ounce. So he's not even wearing 10 ounce fight gloves, let alone 16 or 18 ounce sparring gloves. But I have seen Joshua on the pads before. I think it was in the lead up to the Klitschko fight, a couple of weeks out from the Klitschko fight, when he was wearing fight gloves and he was doing a pad session with McCracken, and he looked similarly fast and sharp in that session. So this is not a one-off just because he's wearing these tiny little 3 or 4 ounce bag mitts. No, I've seen him wear fight gloves and look, you know, nearly as impressive and sharp and fast as this. And as I say, he looks more fluid than he has done before, and I think he's improving. There's a moment in this video where he starts throwing double uppercuts, and he throws them with very good technique. He's keeping his balance very well, and he's throwing these 2 right uppercuts. He's throwing straight right hands, hooks, 1-2s, just very, very impressive for a man of that size to be able to move like that. And Fury here is wearing actual boxing gloves. I'm not sure what size gloves these are because these heavyweights today are so huge, it's hard to know from looking at a pad session whether they're wearing fight gloves or whether they're wearing sparring gloves. Because a guy the size of Fury can make 16-ounce gloves look like 10-ounce gloves. That's how big he is. But yeah, nonetheless, there's that. The fact that Joshua's wearing small gloves here and Fury might be wearing 10-ounce fight gloves here. Whereas Lewis is wearing, I think, probably 16-ounce, maybe 18s. There's that to take into account. And there's also the fact that the trainers these days tend to bring the pads, when a fighter throws the punches, the trainers these days tend to bring the pads towards the fighter's gloves and meet the fighter's punch halfway. Or maybe, if not halfway, at least part of the way. And what that does is 2 things. One, it makes it look as though the fighter is punching faster than they really are. And 2, it doubles the impact of the fighter's glove hitting the pad because you're bringing the pad forward to meet the glove. It doubles the impact and therefore doubles the sound that it makes. And on top of that, a lot of the pads that these trainers use these days are specifically designed to make a loud cracking sound when you hit them. You know, just to make it more of a spectacle and make it more impressive when somebody does hit them. So that does have to be said. He's wearing these tiny little gloves, which is going to make him look faster anyway. Plus, his trainer, is bringing the pads forward to meet his punches, which is also going to make it look faster. And Fury with Ben Davison, it was the same thing. Ben Davison was bringing the pads forward even more than Robert McCracken to meet Fury's hands. And again, that makes Fury look faster than he really is. But even taking those things into consideration, I'm telling you now, these guys still look fast. Very fast. But as far as that pad situation goes, Manny Stewart did not believe in bringing the pads forward to meet a punch when his fighter was doing pads with him. He didn't believe in that. He believed in holding the pads completely still and letting the fighter punch through the pad. That was his way of going about it. And me personally, I prefer it that way because then you're training your fighter to punch through the target rather than at the target. You understand? That was Manny Stewart's rationale for doing pads the way he did. He would hold it completely still. He wouldn't bring it forward even an inch to meet your hand. In most of the pad sessions I saw of Manny Stewart over the years, particularly with Lennox Lewis, he'd hold it completely still and Lewis would throw his shots. But still, Lewis looks decent on the pads, don't get it twisted, but he didn't look anywhere near as explosive just from an athletic point of view as a Joshua or as slick as a Fury. And here's another example of a trainer, Kevin Rooney, who, again, like Manny Stewart, he didn't bring the pads forward to meet Mike Tyson's punches. He would hold the pads still and let Mike Tyson punch at the pads. And to this day, I've never seen a heavyweight more impressive on the pads than Mike Tyson. I've never seen a heavyweight more impressive on the bag than Mike Tyson either. But it does have to be said, you know, Mike Tyson's 5'10", in his prime between 215 to 220. So he's a small heavyweight. You would expect a guy who's that small to have some type of speed advantage over a guy who's 6'6", 240, 250. All right. But nevertheless, very, very impressive athleticism for a guy of this size, you know, for guys of this kind of size. And again, Wilder as well, although not a big guy in terms of weight, he's obviously tall and he's not as well coordinated as Joshua and Fury, but he's still explosive. That I will say, you know. But again, for a guy who's 215, there have been many 215-pound heavyweights who are very explosive and had fast hands. So it's a little more shocking when you see the hand speed and the movement from a Fury or a Joshua just because of the bulk that they've got on them. You know, God knows what they're feeding the heavyweights these days. Now, people do say that athletes get better over time. I mean, certainly if you look at track and field and weightlifting, It's definitely true. The numbers don't lie. The athletes are running faster, jumping higher, and lifting more than ever before. But it's not necessarily true throughout the whole of boxing. With the heavyweights, it's certainly true. With the big heavyweights, anyway. Let me not say with the heavyweights. With the giant heavyweights, it's true. They're certainly moving faster and are more athletic and better coordinated than they were in decades gone by. But with the smaller heavyweights, not so much. There's no smaller heavyweight today that's as fast as a Mike Tyson. Definitely not. Even in the cruiserweight division. I mean, the cruiserweights today are a similar size to the heavyweights in the 1970s. A lot of the heavyweights anyway. People like Joe Frazier, Ken Norton early on in his career, even Muhammad Ali early on in his career, these would have been cruiserweights if they were around boxing today. And none of those guys would be out of place in today's cruiserweight division in terms of physical ability, athleticism, etc. Not at all. In fact, Muhammad Ali is still faster than any cruiserweight around today, including Usyk. So when you go down through the weight divisions, you don't really see, even though today we're supposed to have this superior nutrition and training methods and all this kind of stuff, you don't really see a massive improvement, if any improvement at all, in most weight divisions when it comes to the fighter's athletic ability. Roy Jones Jr. was in his prime in the 90s. Is there anybody around today in the middleweight, super middleweight, or light heavyweight division that has the kind of athleticism of a Roy Jones Jr.? Definitely not. I know Roy Jones Jr. was not only a once-in-a-generation type talent. I mean, he's the most athletically gifted fighter I've ever seen. But he was not only a once-in-a-generation type talent, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime type talent. Incredible how athletically gifted Roy Jones Jr. was. But even apart from him, you look at the other guys who are drifting around, you know, middleweight, super middleweight, light heavyweight. You had the likes of Michael Nunn, James Toney. Are they any slower or less athletically gifted than the middleweights or super middleweights or light heavyweights around today? I would say definitely not. Michael Nunn, very athletically gifted. James Toney, very fast hands. Very fluid. Same goes for, let's say, light middleweights. In years gone by, you had Tommy Hearns as a light middleweight, very fast and explosive. Big puncher. You had Terry Norris. You know, he had his flaws as a fighter, no question. But Terry Norris had some fast hands on him at 154. Now, it does have to be said that the average 154-pounder today is bigger than Terry Norris. Bigger than who else? Maybe Mike McCallum, etc. And this is down to the fact that weight cutting techniques have advanced and also rehydration techniques have advanced. So fighters today can cut a lot more weight than they used to because of the weight cutting techniques. Also because in decades gone by, weigh-ins used to be on the day of the fight, on the morning of the fight. And so if a weigh-in is on the morning of the fight, then there's no way you're going to be able to cut as much weight and then rehydrate the way fighters can do today when the weigh-in is over 24 hours before the fight in the modern times. So these days, the likes of a Jarrett Hurd and etc., these are huge light middleweights. I hope I didn't say light heavyweight a few seconds ago. These are huge light middleweights. These guys, if they were weighing in on the day of the fight, like they used to back in the days, they wouldn't be fighting at light middleweight. They might even be fighting at light heavyweight or at least super middleweight. Some of these light middleweights, they're huge. But nonetheless, even if you put any of those guys in the light heavyweight category, are they more athletic than a Roy Jones Jr. when he was light heavyweight? You know? So you don't tend to see the improvement in athleticism, speed, coordination, etc. outside of the heavyweight division. From minimum weight all the way through to cruiserweight, there hasn't really been an improvement from what I can see in terms of... Some guys might look aesthetically in better condition than the fighters in the past. Their bodies might look more ripped, but in terms of what they can actually do, you know, Sugar Ray Leonard was tremendously fast. Tremendously fast as a welterweight. All the way through up middleweight and super middleweight and all that. Very, very fast. Is Keith Thurman or Errol Spence or any of these guys faster than Sugar Ray Leonard? Hell no. These guys are not better athletes than Leonard. You know? So it's only really with the big heavyweights where you're seeing this massive improvement in coordination and speed and athleticism. But for the rest of the fighters in boxing, you know, not really much of a difference in terms of improvement, at least. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Are you as impressed as I am by the speed, the movement, the coordination of these modern day heavyweights? The giant heavyweights I'm talking about, not the smaller guys, because there's always going to be, oh, someone saying, oh, they're not as fast as Tyson. Tyson's a little guy. I'm talking about the giant heavyweights, the guys who are 6'5 plus, 230 pound plus. There's never been a time when they can move the way they move now. With the kind of speed and coordination, the athletic, it's incredible. Riddick Bowe, to be fair, did have a very smooth boxing style. He would throw very smooth, nice combinations on the inside. That I will say. And you obviously had Shannon Briggs, who was tremendously but Shannon Briggs wasn't as big as a Joshua or a Fury. But Shannon Briggs was tremendously athletically gifted. Shannon Briggs is actually one of the most athletically gifted big guys I've seen. Shannon Briggs in his prime was, you know, he is 6'4". And in his prime, I want to say he was around 226. So he was not as big, definitely not as big as a Joshua or a Fury. But he was still fairly big. And he was very athletically gifted in his prime. But the likes of Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis, they were fast. You know, Lewis was athletic. Bowe had quick hands and was fluid. But I never saw any of them look as dynamic on the pads as Joshua. I never saw either of them look as slick on the pads as a Fury. So, you know, some people say that heavyweights get better with each generation. I mean, I would say the big heavyweights get better with each generation. The biggest guys are more fluid, faster, better coordinated, generally with each generation. But as I say, the other heavyweights, not so much. You know, not really at all, actually. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. I know that Joshua said after the Klitschko fight that he had adjusted his training times because he said in the lead up to the Klitschko fight, it might have also been in the lead up to the Takam fight, I'm not sure. He said that he wasn't sleeping well because he was training too late. He would do sessions like, I guess, right up until 10, 11 at night or whatever. And then he wasn't able to wind down well enough to get a good night's sleep. So he was missing out on a lot of sleep. And it took its toll on him in the Klitschko training camp. And I could see it, actually. By the time the open workout happened for the Klitschko fight, the final open workout before the fight, to me, Joshua did look tired. And you don't want a guy looking tired in fight week when it's a heavyweight. If you're a lighter weight guy who has to cut weight and make weight, then you can understand them looking tired. But heavyweights don't have to cut weight. Heavyweights don't have to make weight, should I say. They don't have to get down to a certain weight, you know, to qualify to fight, right? To be eligible to fight. Heavyweights can weigh whatever they like. So you don't want to see a heavyweight in fight week looking tired and lethargic. And to me, Joshua did in the lead up to the Klitschko fight. But he says he's adjusted his sleeping, he's adjusted his training to train earlier on in the day. And he feels fresher. And I'm expecting to see the very best of Anthony Joshua against Alexander Povetkin, based on how fresh he looks here. He says he feels tired. I saw an interview with him today as well. He says he feels tired, but he's looking very sharp to me. Very sharp. And he's probably just moving into his peak now. He probably hasn't reached his peak quite yet, but he's going to be moving into it in the next couple of years. And we might be on the brink of seeing something very special, potentially, from Anthony Joshua. And if Fury can get his act together. We might see something very special from him too. Then again, we might see something to eclipse both of them from Deontay Wilder. We won't know until these guys get in the ring and duke it out. But I've been saying for a long time that we're living in a new golden era for heavyweight boxing. I maintain that. There's nothing that I've seen so far that has made me want to change my mind and say, actually, I was wrong. We're not living in a new golden age of heavyweight boxing. No, we are. We absolutely are. And it won't be until this era is over and these guys are all retired that people will look back and actually appreciate these guys. That's how it normally is with boxing. Fighters are often not appreciated when they're active, when they're around at the time. I mean, believe it or not, when Muhammad Ali first burst on the scene in the 1960s, beat Sonny Liston, he wasn't taken seriously for a long time. Obviously, I wasn't around at the time, but I've watched so many documentaries and heard so many interviews and watched so many interviews with people who were around at the time. And they say Ali wasn't taken seriously at first. A lot of people felt like not only was the second Liston fight a fix, a lot of people felt like the first Liston fight was a fix. And they thought Ali was some kind of joke champion, a circus act. They thought there was some type of shadowy forces behind it. And Ali was a fraud. It took a long time for a lot of people in the boxing establishment in the United States to actually take Ali seriously as a champion. I remember watching a documentary, I think it was with Mike Tyson and Harry Carpenter, where Harry Carpenter was saying this, because obviously he was old enough to have been around when Ali was fighting and whatnot. And he said people didn't take him seriously at the time. People dismissed him. It's only after the fact people hated Ali for a long time. Obviously, he had a lot of support from the black community because of civil rights and he was standing up for civil rights and all that kind of thing. But certainly the wider American public, they didn't like Ali. He had to go through his trials and tribulations, losing to Frazier, losing to Norton, coming back from adversity, beating Foreman. That's when he started getting widespread recognition and praise from the wider American audience and the audience worldwide. You know, Lennox Lewis I've talked about before. He was rubbished for most of his career. I remember that well because I lived through that era and I was following boxing incessantly in the 1990s. I was such a hardcore boxing fan. It was probably unhealthy during that decade. And I can assure you Lennox Lewis was dismissed, ridiculed, rubbished, called a paper champion, called a fraud, called a phony for most of his career. It's only now that people look back and say, actually, he was pretty good. You know, and it's going to be the same with this era. Right now, there are still plenty of people saying Joshua's a fraud. He's rubbish. The heavyweight division is in a terrible state right now. He's garbage. Fury's garbage. Wilder's garbage. None of them can fight. I still see people saying this. But in decades to come, they'll look back and say, actually, these guys were really good. What a great era this was, because there will come a dark age in heavyweight boxing again. Oh yeah, there will. We've just come out of one with the Klitschko's. And look, the Klitschko's were both fantastic fighters. It's not their fault that they were reigning in a weak era. But that's what was happening. Same as Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, a fantastic talent, but in his prime, he was reigning over a weak heavyweight division. With Tyson, at least, he was exciting. So even though the division was weak, he was taking out whatever opposition was there at the time in spectacular fashion and making it look good. With the Klitschko's, as great as they were not exactly the most exciting for most of their title reigns. And so that's why I call it a bit of a dark age for heavyweight boxing, where they didn't really have much competition and neither one of them was particularly exciting in the way that they fought. And there will come eras like that in future where we don't have a plethora of evenly matched big men who are all talented and dangerous. There will come eras where there's only maybe one or two guys and the rest of the division is absolutely dead. So appreciate the heavyweights while they're around. the likes of Wilder, Fury, Josh. Appreciate them now. And there'll probably be other guys rising to prominence within this era. Your Daniel Dubois and maybe Joe Joyce, maybe even Martin Bacoli. He might be a dark horse in the division. And there are others too. A Jagba, the Nigerian heavyweight. You know, there is so much talent in the heavyweight division right now. I mean, you got your Dylan Whites as well. Jarrell Miller could be another dark horse. Joseph Parker's still there. You know, Povetkin, we'll see what he can do against Joshua on the 22nd. So it's a great time for heavyweight boxing. And as I say, the big men, the guys who are 6'5 plus, 240 plus, the athleticism of them today is just incredible. Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me know how you feel. It's Hatman, I'm out.